Today, we're talking about hydration specifically for women. I had the question, do women really need electrolyte supplements? I couldn't find the answer easily, so I dug into the research to answer this for myself, for my patients, and for you to give you a nice summary on this of, whether or not you need to be taking things, when to take them, and which brands are actually worth it or not. So first, let's go into the basics of hydration and the difference for women compared to men. Now, one thing to know is women have a lower total body water and smaller losses overall compared to men. But this is really dependent on the person, and our hydration needs shift across our menstrual cycle. So in certain phases of our menstrual cycle, we're retaining more water, we're losing more water. And so that's also an important variation to note. Estrogen and progesterone affect fluid retention, especially in the luteal phase, which can make a lot of women feel bloated and yet still relatively dehydrated during this time because we're having a lot of water stored between our cells and not really being absorbed. Now, during perimenopause, we also have declining estrogen at certain points in our cycle, and this can also impact temperature regulation and thirst. So dehydration can be more common in this phase. A quick stat is even 1% to 2% of dehydration can affect your energy, your mood, and even your cognitive function. What that means is if you're losing 1% to 2% of your body weight in sweat from, a workout, from any other sweat losses, then that could be impacting you, even though that's considered mild dehydration. Now let's break down the electrolytes that are in electrolyte supplements and the electrolytes that we're commonly losing in sweat. Sodium is a really big one. And on average, we're losing about 500 to 1500 milligrams per liter of sweat. Potassium, about 150 to 250 milligrams per liter of sweat. And magnesium is much lower at 10 to 20 milligrams per liter of sweat. Again, there are a lot of variables that go into how much we're sweating and how much of these electrolytes we're losing at any given time. There's a lot of genetic variability. It can depend on our diet, our acclimation to heat, how long we're exercising for, etc. Now, in general, most women lose less sodium than men on average. But if you work out in heat, if you're sweating really heavily, if you have a low sodium diet, you can still end up depleted, especially during high intensity or longer workouts. For women, about 300 to 800 milligrams of sodium per hour is recommended during exercise. And this is sort of average loss of sodium from sweating from moderate to high intensity exercise. When you're doing gentle workouts, yoga, Pilates, something that is, easy to talk through, or you're not really getting your heart rate up too much, you may not need to take any electrolytes at all. And plain water is likely just fine to keep your hydration status good. You don't necessarily need to be taking more. But if you're doing a moderate to high intensity exercise for over an hour, that seems to be the magic point where most women would benefit from having a little bit of repletion with these electrolytes. Now, one thing to also note, and this is sort of like a personal piece from me, is that I am checking women's magnesium, potassium, other mineral levels regularly. And I do see that a lot of women are deficient or have suboptimal levels of magnesium and potassium. And that's also something to keep in mind here, that we're not always just trying to replete what we've lost there in the moment. If we're already deficient in magnesium, potassium, maybe from long-term losses that haven't been appropriately repleted, which again, I do see very frequently, then there also is an added benefit potentially of repleting those things more regularly, even if we're not actively losing them during exercise at that moment. So what does that mean? Okay, maybe certain people who have a great status of magnesium and potassium, their electrolytes are all on point. They don't necessarily need to take electrolytes unless they are having high intensity exercise and they're losing a lot of sweat. For those of us who maybe are already a little bit deficient, maybe we've had chronic excessive stress that, does make us lose different minerals. We've been, sweating our entire life without repleting it appropriately as we're a kid, whatever. If for any reason we're concerned that we have low levels or we've seen that on testing, then it may be worth doing electrolytes more regularly or, repleting some of those minerals more regularly in any sort of form, then that could be beneficial. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm trying to make this as simple as possible because it is really complicated. It really does depend. And one thing to note too, especially if you're an athlete, one of the best things to do is actually to measure your sweat loss, especially if you're having these high intensity training sessions very regularly. It's a great idea to actually check your sweat loss amount. You can weigh yourself before and after a workout to determine that. There are other testing that can go along with that, but you can have individualized sodium repletion recommendations then based on that. But if you're the average person, you're not really too worried about getting that technical. Then this should be a good template to go off of. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the common electrolyte brands. You might have seen, if you've, searched for different electrolytes, you've shopped for them at the store, you might have noticed that there's a wide variation and variety in how much of different electrolytes there are in there. For example, Element is a really common brand. It's very, very, very high in sodium. It has about 1,000 milligrams of sodium per packet, 200 milligrams of potassium, 60 milligrams of magnesium. And this is one that I'm really cautious about recommending to women because actually to most women, this is probably more sodium that you need to be taking in, especially if you're having a regular diet. If you're having, salty foods here and there, if you're ever eating at restaurants, there's going to be a lot more sodium. You don't necessarily need this amount of sodium, especially if you're just, a regular person doing regular exercise that isn't super high intensity and long endurance. If you're an endurance athlete, that might be a different story. But for the average person, this is probably more sodium than you ever need to be taking in addition to your regular diet and everything. And now some of the other common brands have a big range. One of my favorite products is Needed Hydration Support. And this one is a little bit more balanced in the amount of electrolytes. It has 250 milligrams of sodium, 150 milligrams of potassium, and 100 milligrams of magnesium. Technically for hydration, this isn't the ratio that you'd necessarily be losing. It's a bit higher in potassium and magnesium. But again, for most of my patients who I'm seeing are low in potassium and magnesium, this is one that I'm often recommending because it does have more of what they need to replete and a fair amount of sodium. That's a pretty good average for the typical person, what they might lose in an hour sweat session. There are some different ones. Fringe is another one. Thorne, Catalyte is another great one. Designs for Health has a good one. Ultima or Liquid IV. Liquid IV is a sort of a different one that has a lot of sugar in it also, which their branding or in their marketing tells you that you need glucose, you need sugar for sodium absorption. So I want to touch on this briefly. That is true. Sodium absorption can be assisted by sugar. And so again, especially if you are losing a lot of sweat, you're having very long endurance training sessions, then this could be a good idea. You might want to replete glucose for other reasons too, and it could help with that rehydration. But again, for most people who are just using it to rebalance things a little bit, and they're not necessarily having super hard training sessions, then having that extra sugar for a lot of us might throw us off, might be a little bit too much and make our blood sugar a little bit wacky. So for most people, I'm not recommending that as just the go-to for repleting the electrolytes. So again, take away from this, when you're choosing an electrolyte, look at the amount that you're taking in and really see if it's a good balance for you. If you have lower potassium, magnesium, maybe choose one that's a little bit higher in those. You can also look at the other supplements you're taking. If you're taking a multivitamin, you're taking additional magnesium, then that might counterbalance things as well. And look at how much sodium is in there compared to the workout that you're doing. If you're doing, again, under an hour of exercise, it's maybe like moderate to high intensity, I wouldn't really go above 800 milligrams of sodium especially if you're drinking it quickly, if you're drinking it within that session or soon after. I don't think most of us really need much more than that. So aiming for one of those 500 milligrams or below should be appropriate for your needs. Again, a takeaway here, do you actually need 1,000 milligrams of sodium? Probably not. So for most women, choosing the middle ground, something like needed hydration support, Fringe, which has a great amount of magnesium as well, or something like the Thorn Catalyte can be a really good option for you to replete your needs. Special considerations for women. Again, women are not just small men. We're not just losing less than them because of our body size or amount. We're also cyclical human beings that have these hormonal variations going on. Whether or not you're on birth control of some sort, or hormonal birth control or not, this can play into things. So again, if we're having high estrogen, even estrogen dominance symptoms, or just in our normal phase, like in our follicular phase, we might have better fluid retention and you might not need to replete as heavily. When we have progesterone on board during our luteal phase, you may have more sodium retention, the possible bloating. So hydration can be helpful here to sort of create a balance there and get your cells feeling the hydration. In times of lower estrogen, you might be less thirsty, but you may get dehydrated more easily. So really making sure that you're getting good hydration, whether or not it has electrolytes. And another special population is postpartum. Your hydration demand increases fairly significantly, about 25 to 30 ounces a day, especially if you're lactating. You need more hydration in general. And electrolytes can actually be really helpful in this population too, with maintaining milk supply, maintaining energy. And this goes with pregnancy too. Again, our blood volume dilutes, we have higher hydration needs, and this is variable depending on which trimester you're in. It can also depend on if you're feeling very nauseous in first trimester, especially if you're vomiting, having diarrhea, anything like that. Then I would recommend really being on top of hydration in general and maybe going for a daily dose of one of those moderate electrolyte options. So that can help with hydration and also just help you feel better. We tend to feel a little bit more revived with something like that. So what matters most with this, again, our electrolyte needs change throughout our lives, sometimes throughout our month, throughout the cycle. What matters most is tuning into your body and adjusting based on how you feel. So are you having a heavy exercise session or not? Are you feeling dehydrated or not? Are you having headaches, muscle cramps? Those could be signs that you are dehydrated and or low in some of these key minerals. So those might be good suggestions to be on top of this and maybe try something if you haven't already been taking something. Some quick takeaways. 1, even mild dehydration can impact your mood and energy. So be aware of how much water you're drinking, ideally filtered water. A good basis for this could be half of your body weight in water each day. But again, it depends on how much you're sweating or not. So tune into your body, make sure you're getting enough and clue into those signs if you're having signs of dehydration or not. Number 2, most women lose less sodium than men, but activity, heat, low salt diets, all of that could increase your needs. So make sure to take that into account. Number 3, choose electrolytes based on your intensity and how much you're sweating. Keep in mind how much sodium there is in what you're choosing and that there is a wide variety. Not all of them are created. And so don't go based off of the hype of a certain product. Go based off of your needs and what's going to be the best fit for you. And 4, again, track how you feel, especially if you are experiencing fatigue, dizziness, cramps, lightheadedness. Those could be signs of dehydration, low blood pressure that could be involved with having the electrolytes imbalanced. So tune into this and make sure that you're listening to your body because that's always going to be the most important thing. So here's the bottom line from my research into the data and my experience as a women's wellness doctor. Hydration isn't one size fits all. And unfortunately, that could be a frustrating answer because we just want to know what's right for us. But it's not going to be what's right for you isn't going to be right for someone else and so forth. So tune into your body, know what you're taking, know what you need, and that could make all the difference in how you feel, how you're able to show up in life, in your exercise sessions, how you're able to make gains, continue to get stronger, and have good vitality and longevity going forward. I would love to hear if you have questions about this. feel free to send us an email, message me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and any questions. If there are a lot of questions on something, I'd be happy to come back here and answer those because I want to know what information you really want to know about. I'm here to support you on your wellness journey so you can feel your best now and in the future because we have all these ups and downs in life. Things are going to change, but you can take control of your health and make a new story for yourself with how you feel going forward.